The church bells were still ringing when Selina's world began to crumble. Not that day. No, that day was perfect. White lace, tearful smiles, promises whispered under stained glass windows. That day, everyone in Brookstone believed they were witnessing true love. But sometimes the most beautiful beginnings hide the ugliest endings. 3 years later, Selina would stand in that same church, signing divorce papers while her husband planned his next wedding to another woman. The same man who once promised her forever had just told her she was never enough. But this isn't a story about endings. This is about what happens when a woman refuses to stay broken, and when powerful men decide to teach a lesson that destroys everything. What would you do if the person you trusted most betrayed you in the cruelest way possible? Hold that thought, because Selina's story will show you exactly what real strength looks like. The town of Brookstone wasn't the kind of place where secrets survived long. Tucked between rolling hills and golden wheat fields, it was small enough that everyone knew everyone else's business before they knew it themselves. Maybe that's why Selina Moreau stood out so much. In a place where gossip flowed like water, she carried herself with quiet grace that made people stop and stare. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. Selina wasn't born wealthy. Her parents owned a small flower shop on Main Street, barely making ends meet most months. But her mother always said something that stuck with her: money might fill your pockets, honey, but integrity fills your soul. Selina believed that with everything in her. She worked at the local library, helped elderly neighbors with their groceries, and never missed Sunday service. The kind of woman who saw beauty in broken things and believed in fixing them with love. That's probably why Adrian Corin caught her attention so fast. Adrian had the kind of charm that could sell ice to someone freezing. Tall, well-dressed, with a smile that made promises he might not keep. He'd moved to Brookstone from the city with big dreams and even bigger ambitions. While other men talked about staying put, Adrian talked about conquering the world. He had plans, goals, vision. And when he looked at Selina, she felt like she was part of something greater than her small-town life. Their first meeting happened on a rainy Thursday outside the post office. Selina was struggling with a box of books for the library donation drive when Adrian appeared like some romantic movie hero, offering his umbrella and his help. "Can't have all those stories getting ruined," he said, his eyes twinkling. "Stories are meant to be preserved." She should have paid attention to what kind of stories he meant. The courtship was everything Selina had dreamed about since she was a little girl playing wedding with her dolls. Long walks by Miller's Creek, where Adrian would tell her about the empire he planned to build. Picnics under the old oak tree where he'd bring wildflowers and poetry he claimed to write himself. Evening drives in his car, the nicest vehicle most people in Brookstone had ever seen, while he painted pictures of their future together. "You and me, Selina," he'd whisper, holding her hand as they watched the sunset. "We'll show this whole world what real love looks like. What real success looks like. You're going to be a queen, and I'm going to be the king who gives you everything you deserve." Those words made her heart race. Not because of the promise of wealth, but because someone finally saw her as more than just the flower shop girl. Adrian made her feel special, chosen, like she was the missing piece of his grand plan. The proposal happened on Christmas Eve, right there in the town square while the whole community watched their annual tree lighting. Adrian got down on one knee in the falling snow, pulling out a ring that sparkled brighter than the star on top of the tree. "Selina Moreau," he said loud enough for everyone to hear, "will you help me build a love story that lasts forever?" She said yes before he finished the question. The wedding 6 months later was the social event of the year in Brookstone. The church was packed wall to wall, flowers overflowing from every corner, and Selina walking down the aisle in her grandmother's lace dress looked like something straight out of a fairy tale. When Adrian lifted her veil and looked into her eyes, even the toughest men in town felt tears threatening. "With this ring," Adrian said, his voice steady and strong, "I promise to love, honor, and cherish you. Through good times and bad, rich or poor, in sickness and health. You are my heart, Selina. You are my forever." The church erupted in applause. The reception lasted until dawn. And for one perfect night, love felt like it could conquer anything. If Selina could go back to that moment now, she'd probably whisper a warning to her younger self. She'd tell that glowing bride to pay attention to how Adrian looked at other women during the reception. She'd point out how quickly his attention wandered when other people tried to talk to him. She'd mention how he seemed more interested in the expensive gifts than the people giving them. But hindsight is cruel that way. And on that perfect wedding night, surrounded by laughter and love and possibility, Selina had no idea that her husband's heart was already wandering toward someone else. Someone who would turn their fairy tale into a nightmare that would leave scars on her soul for years to come. The honeymoon in the mountains was blissful. 2 weeks of just them, morning coffee in bed, hiking trails hand in hand, making love under starlit skies while Adrian whispered promises about the beautiful life they'd build together. When they returned to Brookstone and moved into the little house Adrian had bought on Elm Street, Selina threw herself into making it perfect. She planted flowers in the yard, hung curtains in the windows, and filled every room with the kind of warmth that turns a house into a home. For the first few months, everything seemed magical. But while Selina was busy creating their perfect life, Adrian was busy creating something else entirely. And the woman who would destroy everything Selina believed about love was about to walk into their story, bringing chaos that would shatter more than just a marriage. Her name was Marissa Vera, and she was everything Selina was not. Bold where Selina was gentle, calculating where Selina was trusting, ruthless where Selina was kind. And from the moment Adrian laid eyes on her, Selina's fairy tale was living on borrowed time. The first lie came dressed as overtime. "Sorry honey, big client meeting ran late," Adrian said, loosening his tie as he walked through the door at nearly midnight. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair slightly messed, and there was something different in his eyes. Something distant. Something guilty. Selina looked up from the couch where she'd been waiting, a plate of his favorite dinner growing cold on the table. "I saved you some pot roast," she said softly, studying his face. "You look exhausted." He barely glanced at the food. "Not hungry. Just need a shower and sleep." She watched him disappear upstairs, something twisting in her stomach that she couldn't name yet. This was the man who used to kiss her hello before even taking off his coat. The man who'd rather talk to her than eat when he came home. Now he couldn't even meet her eyes. But love makes excuses for the people it protects. So Selina told herself he was just stressed, just working hard for their future like he'd always promised. The overtime excuses multiplied like weeds. Late meetings. Weekend conferences. Business trips that seemed to pop up overnight. Adrian's phone started going off at odd hours, and he'd step outside to take the calls. When Selina asked about work, his answers became vague, rushed, like he was reading from a script he hadn't memorized yet. "Everything okay?" she asked one evening, finding him staring out the window with his phone in his hand. "Of course." His response came too fast. "Just thinking about expansion opportunities. You know how it is." But she didn't know how it was. Because the Adrian she married used to share everything with her. His dreams, his worries, his plans. Now she felt like she was living with a stranger wearing her husband's face. The real sign came 3 months into the lies. Selina was doing laundry when she found it, a receipt tucked in Adrian's shirt pocket. Dinner for two at Romano's, the fancy Italian place 2 towns over. The same night he'd told her he was working late on quarterly reports. Her hands trembled as she held the paper. 2 glasses of wine. 2 entrees. 2 desserts. The timestamp showed 9:30 p.m., right when he'd called to say he'd be home soon. Maybe it was a client dinner. Maybe there was an explanation. But deep down, in the place where women's intuition lives, Selina already knew the truth. She was just afraid to face it. That weekend, Adrian announced another business trip. "Big opportunity in Springfield," he said, not quite looking at her as he packed his overnight bag. "Could be the break we've been waiting for." Springfield. Selina frowned. "I thought you said your biggest clients were local." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Business expands, Selina. You can't stay small town forever if you want to make it big." There it was again, that edge in his voice, like her questions were annoying him, like caring about his life was somehow wrong. After he left, Selina couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly off. She found herself checking his social media, something she'd never done before. Looking for clues, for proof that her fears were just paranoia. She found more than she bargained for. There, tagged in a photo from 3 weeks ago at a downtown bar, was Adrian. But he wasn't alone. A stunning woman with dark hair and red lips was pressed close to him, her hand on his chest, both of them laughing at something private. The woman's name was tagged, Marissa Vera. Selina stared at the photo until her eyes burned. This woman was everything she wasn't: bold makeup, designer clothes, the kind of confidence that demanded attention. In the photo, Adrian looked more alive than he had in months. More engaged. More present. More like himself. She scrolled through Marissa's profile with shaking fingers. The woman was clearly successful, judging by the expensive restaurants, luxury cars, and high-end boutiques featured in her posts. She was the type of woman who didn't wait for opportunities, she created them. Everything about her screamed power, ambition, danger. And apparently, Adrian was fascinated. The evidence piled up like a crime scene. More photos from different events. Comments between them that seemed too friendly, too familiar. Inside jokes that didn't include wives. And then, buried in the posts from 2 months ago, a picture that stopped Selina's heart cold. Adrian and Marissa at some corporate event, his arm around her waist, both dressed to kill. The caption read, "Power couples know how to make things happen." Power couples. Not business associates. Not casual friends. Couples. Selina slammed the laptop shut, her whole body shaking with rage and heartbreak. How long had this been going on? How many lies had he told? How many times had he come home from being with her and kissed Selina goodnight like nothing was wrong? When Adrian returned from his business trip on Sunday evening, Selina was waiting. She'd spent 2 days rehearsing what she'd say, how she'd handle the confrontation. She'd be calm, mature, give him a chance to explain. But when he walked through the door with that same distant expression, carrying guilt in his shoulders like a heavy coat, all her planned words disappeared. "How long?" she asked quietly. Adrian froze halfway through taking off his jacket. "How long what? How long have you been seeing Marissa Vera?" The color drained from his face. For a moment, just a moment, she saw panic flash in his eyes. Then something else took over. Something cold. Something that looked almost like relief. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Selina pulled out her phone, showing him the photos. Romeo's restaurant 3 months ago. The corporate event. The bar downtown. Should I keep going? Adrian stared at the screen, his silence confirming everything. When he finally looked up, the man she'd married was gone. In his place stood someone she didn't recognize. "You've been spying on me," he said, his voice accusatory. "I've been trying to understand why my husband turned into a stranger." Selena's voice cracked. "I've been wondering why the man who used to talk to me for hours can barely look me in the eye." "Maybe because you've become boring, Selena." The words came out like bullets. "Maybe because you're satisfied with this small-town life while I have bigger dreams." Each word was a knife to her heart. "I supported your dreams. I encouraged." "You encouraged small thinking," Adrian interrupted. "You want me to stay safe, stay comfortable, stay mediocre." "Marissa understands ambition. She pushes me to be more than this." "More than what?" "More than married. More than faithful." Adrian's laugh was bitter. "More than trapped." Trapped. Like their marriage was a prison sentence. Like the love they'd promised each other was somehow holding him back from his true destiny. Selena felt something break inside her chest. Not just her heart. Something deeper. The part of her that had believed in fairy tales. The part that had trusted completely. The part that had thought love could conquer anything. "So what now?" she whispered. "Do you want a divorce?" Adrian looked at her for a long moment, and for just a second, she thought she saw regret flicker across his face. But then his jaw set, and his voice went cold. "I'll have my lawyer call you tomorrow." And with that, he walked upstairs, leaving Selena standing in the ruins of everything she'd believed about love. But Adrian had no idea that his cruelty was just getting started. And he had no clue that the woman he was throwing away for his ambitious new love would soon catch the attention of two brothers who had the power to destroy everything he'd ever dreamed of building. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered like a death sentence in a manila envelope. Selena sat at her kitchen table, still in her pajamas, staring at the legal documents that would officially end her marriage. The words blurred together through her tears: irreconcilable differences, division of assets, dissolution of marriage. Cold, clinical terms that couldn't begin to capture the devastation of having your whole life torn apart by someone who once promised to protect it. 3 weeks had passed since Adrian moved out. 3 weeks of sleeping alone in their bed, of cooking dinner for one, of explaining to concerned neighbors that things just didn't work out. 3 weeks of dying a little bit every day while pretending she was fine. The house felt haunted by memories. Every corner held a ghost of happier times. The couch where they used to watch movies cuddled together. The kitchen table where Adrian used to bring her coffee and kiss her forehead every morning. The front porch where they'd sat planning their future, dreaming of children and anniversary trips and growing old together. Now those dreams were legal garbage, sorted into neat piles of who gets what. Selena's mother found her there an hour later, still staring at the papers with empty eyes. "Oh, sweetheart," Margaret Moreau whispered, wrapping her daughter in arms that smelled like flower and lavender. "I'm so sorry." "He wants the house," Selena said numbly. "His lawyer says since his income paid the mortgage, he has the stronger claim. 22 months of me making it a home doesn't count for much, apparently." Her mother's jaw tightened. "What does your lawyer say?" "That I should probably let him have it." Selena laughed bitterly. "Turns out I never legally owned anything that mattered. The house is in his name. The car is in his name. Even our joint savings account was set up so he could access it without my signature." "Honey, that's not legal." "It's smart, Mom. Adrian was always smart." Selena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. He planned this. Maybe not from the beginning, but somewhere along the way, he made sure I'd have nothing to fight with when he decided to leave. The truth was worse than financial devastation. Adrian had methodically erased her from their life together, and she'd been too trusting to notice. Too busy believing in their love to see how completely she'd been set up to lose everything. Margaret pulled her daughter closer. "You can stay with us as long as you need. Your room is exactly how you left it." Moving back in with her parents at 26 felt like admitting failure. But with her savings account nearly empty and her job at the library barely paying enough to survive, Selina didn't have many options. Adrian had made sure of that. The gossip in Brookstone was brutal. Small towns love a scandal, and Adrian's affair with the beautiful outsider gave people plenty to whisper about. Some folks took Selina's side, clicking their tongues about faithless husbands and poor sweet Selina who never saw it coming. Others whispered that she must have done something wrong to drive her man away. She was probably too clingy, Selina overheard Mrs. Henderson telling her friend at the grocery store. Men don't leave happy wives. Each comment was a fresh wound, but Selina held her head high. She went to work, helped her parents at the flower shop, and tried to rebuild some kind of life from the ashes of her marriage. She told herself she was strong. She told herself she was surviving. But late at night, alone in her childhood bedroom, she wondered if Adrian was right. If she really was boring. If she really was the kind of woman men left behind. Then came the wedding announcement in the local paper. Mr. Adrian Corin and Ms. Marissa Vera are pleased to announce their engagement. The couple will wed in an intimate ceremony at Grandview Manor, followed by a reception for family and friends. Intimate ceremony. Like their marriage had never existed. Like the 3 years they'd spent building a life together were just a rough draft for his real love story. The wedding was set for 2 months after their divorce was finalized. 2 months. Adrian couldn't even wait a decent interval before making his betrayal public and permanent. Selina stared at the announcement until the words burned into her brain. The photo showed Adrian and Marissa looking like something out of a magazine, him in an expensive suit she'd never seen before, her in a dress that probably cost more than Selina made in 3 months. They looked powerful, successful, like they belonged together in a way that made Selina feel stupid for ever thinking she could compete. But the worst part wasn't seeing them together. The worst part was seeing Adrian's smile. It was genuine, radiant, alive in a way she hadn't seen since their early dating days. This was who he really was. This was the man he became when he wasn't settling for small-town life with a woman who apparently wasn't enough. When the wedding day arrived, Selina made a decision that would haunt her for months. She went to see it. Not as a guest. God knows she wasn't invited. But Grandview Manor sat on a hill visible from the public road, and curiosity won over self-preservation. She parked her beat-up Honda behind a cluster of trees and watched through binoculars as the woman who'd stolen her husband celebrated the happiest day of her life. It was everything Selina's wedding wasn't. Elaborate. Expensive. Extravagant. White roses and gold accents everywhere. A photographer who probably cost more than her parents made in a year. Guests in designer clothes stepping out of luxury cars. And there was Adrian, looking like he'd never been happier in his life. Marissa was stunning in a way that made Selina feel invisible. Her dress was custom-made perfection, her hair styled like a movie star's, her smile confident and victorious. She moved through the crowd like she owned the world, and maybe she did. This was her kind of life. Her level of ambition. Her version of success. Watching them exchange vows was torture, but Selina couldn't look away. This was Adrian's true love story. The one that mattered. The one worth fighting for. When the ceremony ended and the reception began, Selina finally drove away. She'd seen enough. She'd tortured herself enough. It was time to accept that Adrian had moved on to bigger and better things, and she needed to find a way to do the same. But fate wasn't finished with any of them yet. 2 weeks after the wedding, Selina was running errands downtown when she spotted them at Romano's restaurant. Adrian and Marissa, celebrating something at a corner table, both looking like they owned the world. Selina tried to walk past without being seen, but small towns don't allow for that kind of mercy. "Well, well," Marissa's voice carried across the sidewalk. "Look what the cat dragged in." Selina's blood turned to ice. She could have kept walking, should have kept walking. But something in Marissa's tone made her turn around. "Hello, Adrian," she said quietly, ignoring his new wife completely. Adrian looked uncomfortable, glancing between the two women like he was waiting for an explosion. "Selina, how are you doing?" "I'm managing." She kept her voice steady, proud of herself for not breaking. "Congratulations on your marriage." "Thank you," Marissa said sweetly, linking her arm through Adrian's. "It's amazing how everything works out for the best, isn't it? Adrian's so much happier now." The comment was designed to cut, and it did. But Selina had learned something about pain over the past few months. It could either break you or teach you. And she was tired of being broken. "I'm glad," she said simply. "Everyone deserves to be happy." She turned to leave, but Marissa wasn't finished. "You know," the woman called after her, "I always wondered what kind of person lets their husband slip away so easily. Now I understand." Selina stopped walking but didn't turn around. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means some women know how to keep a man interested, and others, well, others shop at thrift stores and call it fashion." The crowd on the sidewalk went quiet. Even in a small town where drama was entertainment, this felt too cruel for public consumption. Adrian should have said something. Should have told his wife to stop. Should have remembered that he'd once loved the woman she was humiliating. Instead, he sat there like a coward, letting it happen. That's when Selina realized something important. She didn't want this man back. Any man who would let his new wife torture his ex-wife in public wasn't worth mourning. Adrian hadn't just left her. He'd shown her exactly who he really was. But Adrian's cruelty was about to escalate beyond words, and what happened next would change all their lives in ways none of them could imagine. The marketplace incident happened on a Saturday morning when the whole town was out doing their weekly shopping. Selina was picking up fresh produce for her mother when she heard the familiar sound of Marissa's laughter cutting through the crowd like a knife. Her stomach clenched, but she kept her head down, hoping to avoid another confrontation. She'd been doing well lately, sleeping better, eating regularly, even smiling occasionally. The last thing she needed was another public humiliation. But avoiding them wasn't an option in a town the size of Brookstone. "Oh my God, Adrian, look!" Marissa's voice carried loud enough for half the market to hear. "It's your little charity case." Selina's hands tightened on her basket, but she kept walking. "Don't engage. Don't give them the satisfaction. Just buy your groceries and go home." "Marissa," Adrian's voice held a warning tone that gave Selina a flicker of hope. Maybe he'd grown a conscience since their last encounter. That hope died quickly. "What?" Marissa continued, her voice dripping with false innocence. "I'm just saying, it's so sad to see someone who's given up on life. Look at her, honey. Those clothes must be from 5 years ago, and that haircut." She made a disgusted clicking sound. "Some people just don't know how to move on with dignity." The words hit their target perfectly. Selina had been wearing the same clothes for months because she couldn't afford new ones. Her haircut was indeed from before the divorce because salon visits weren't in her budget anymore. Every insult landed with surgical precision. Other shoppers were starting to notice. Mrs. Patterson from the church stopped arranging apples to stare. The teenage cashier craned her neck to see what was happening. Even Mr. Williams, who ran the hardware store, paused his conversation to watch the drama unfold. Selina's face burned with humiliation, but she forced herself to keep walking. Almost to the exit. Almost free. You know what the saddest part is? Marissa called out, her voice getting louder. She actually thought she could keep a man like Adrian happy. As if reading library books and arranging flowers could compete with real ambition. That stopped Selina cold. She could handle insults about her clothes, her appearance, even her financial situation. But Marissa was attacking everything she'd tried to build with Adrian, everything she'd believed their marriage stood for. Slowly, she turned around. Adrian and Marissa stood near the organic vegetables display like they owned the place. Marissa wore a designer sundress that probably cost more than Selina's monthly rent, her hair perfect, her makeup flawless. Adrian looked uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable enough to stop what was happening. Is there something you want to say to me directly? Selina asked quietly. The marketplace went dead silent. Even the background music seemed to pause. Marissa smiled, a predator sensing weakness. Oh, so many things. Like how pathetic it is to see someone clinging to the past. Adrian's moved on to better things, sweetheart. Maybe you should too. I am moving on, Selina said, her voice steady despite the rage building in her chest. I'm rebuilding my life after my husband decided his vows meant nothing. Your husband? Marissa laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Honey, look around. See this life Adrian has now? The nice clothes, the expensive dinners, the actual future we're building together? This is what a real marriage looks like. What you had was just practice. Practice. Like their 3 years together, their wedding day, every moment of love they'd shared was just Adrian warming up for the real thing. The crowd was getting larger now. People pretending to shop while hanging on every word of the most dramatic thing to happen in Brookstone in years. Selina could feel their eyes, their judgment, their pity. You're right, Selina said suddenly, surprising everyone including herself. Adrian did upgrade. He found someone who matches his true character perfectly. Marissa's smile faltered. That wasn't the response she'd been expecting. Excuse me. A man who lies to his wife for months is perfect for a woman who builds her happiness on someone else's pain, Selina continued, her voice getting stronger. You two deserve each other. Adrian finally stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. That's enough, Selina. Is it? She turned to face him directly. Because your wife seems to think I need to hear more about how much better she is than me. Maybe you should tell her that kicking someone when they're down isn't actually an achievement. Don't you dare lecture me about character, Adrian snarled, and suddenly he wasn't the charming man she'd married, or even the cold stranger who'd asked for a divorce. This was someone she'd never seen before, ugly, aggressive, dangerous. You want to know the truth? You were holding me back from day one. Marissa sees my potential. She pushes me to be more than some small-town nobody married to a woman who thinks reading romance novels counts as having dreams. Each word was designed to destroy, and they did their job. But instead of crumbling, Selina felt something unexpected, relief. This was who Adrian really was when the mask came off. This was the man she'd mourned losing. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For showing me that I didn't lose anything worth keeping. That's when Adrian snapped. Maybe it was the humiliation of being dismissed by the woman he'd thrown away. Maybe it was the pressure of performing for his new wife. Maybe it was just the entitled rage of a man who expected his ex to stay broken forever. He grabbed a wooden display stick from the fruit vendor and raised it above his head. "You ungrateful!" The stick came down hard across Selina's shoulder, sending her stumbling backward into the tomato display. Produce scattered everywhere. The crowd gasped. Someone screamed. But Selina didn't cry. She didn't crumble. She slowly straightened up, brushed tomato juice off her shirt, and looked Adrian straight in the eye. "Feel better now?" she asked. Adrian stood there holding the stick, breathing hard, his face twisted with an emotion that looked like hatred. Marissa had gone pale, apparently not expecting her husband's anger to turn physical. The entire marketplace stared in shock at the man who'd just beaten his ex-wife with a piece of wood in front of half the town. Adrian started to say something else, but Selina cut him off. "No," she said firmly. "You've said enough. You've done enough. I'm done." She walked away with her head held high, leaving Adrian standing there with his weapon and his shame and his new wife who suddenly looked like she was reconsidering her choice in men. But what none of them knew was that standing in the back of the crowd, near the flower vendor where he'd been quietly observing the local market scene, was a man in an expensive but understated suit. A man who'd watched the entire incident with growing rage. A man who'd seen Adrian strike a woman in public and would never, ever forget it. Lucien Kalin had come to Brookstone to scout potential investment opportunities. Instead, he'd witnessed something that would change the course of all their lives forever. The boardroom in downtown Chicago was nothing like the quaint marketplace in Brookstone. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline, polished marble floors reflected expensive light fixtures, and the air practically hummed with power and money. Lucien Kalin sat at the head of a conference table worth more than most people's houses, but his mind wasn't on quarterly reports or merger opportunities. It was on a woman with quiet dignity who'd taken a beating in public and walked away with her head held high. 3 days had passed since the marketplace incident, and he couldn't shake the image from his mind. "You're distracted," his brother Darius observed, sliding into the chair beside him. Where Lucien was all sharp angles and controlled intensity, Darius radiated a different kind of power, broader, calmer, but no less dangerous when provoked. The Brookstone scouting trip didn't go as planned? Lucien's jaw tightened. Depends on how you define planned. Did you find any investment opportunities? I found something else. Lucien pulled out his phone and showed his brother a photo he'd discreetly taken at the market. It showed Adrian mid-swing, the stick raised above Selina's head, her face calm despite the violence aimed at her. Darius studied the image, his expression growing darker by the second. "What the hell am I looking at?" "A man named Adrian Corin beating his ex-wife in front of half the town," Lucien said quietly. "In broad daylight. Like it was his right. And you just stood there taking pictures?" "I was too far away to intervene, and it happened fast. But I got his name. I got hers. And I've been doing some research." Lucien pulled out a folder thick with documents. Adrian Corin, 29, divorced from Selina Moreau 3 months ago. He left her for a woman named Marissa Vera, married her 2 weeks later. The divorce cleaned Selina out financially. She lost the house, the car, most of their shared assets. Legal. Technically. Adrian was smart about protecting himself. Everything was in his name, and she trusted him too much to question it. Darius flipped through the papers, his frown deepening. "What does this have to do with us?" "This." Lucien pulled out another document. Adrian Corin has been trying to set up meetings with Kalen Industries for 6 months. He wants to pitch us on some kind of partnership deal. Apparently, he thinks aligning with us will make him a major player. And you're telling me this because? Because I want to take the meeting. Darius leaned back in his chair, studying his brother's face. They'd built their empire together over the past decade, starting with a small tech company their father had left them and turning it into a multinational corporation worth billions. In all that time, Darius had never seen Lucien this personally invested in anything outside of business. "This isn't about money," Darius said finally. "No. It's about character." Lucien's voice was ice cold. "We don't do business with men who beat women. We don't partner with cowards who destroy people weaker than themselves. And we definitely don't help pieces of garbage like Adrian Corin build empires on the backs of people they've crushed. So we reject his proposal." Problem solved. Rejecting him isn't enough. Lucien stood up, pacing to the window. That woman took a beating in public and walked away like a queen. She didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't break. She has more dignity in her little finger than Adrian Corin has in his entire body. And men like him only understand power. He thinks he can treat people however he wants because he's never faced consequences that mattered. He's never gone up against anyone who could actually hurt him. Darius was quiet for a long moment, processing what his brother was really saying. "You want to destroy him. I want to teach him a lesson about respect, about consequences, about what happens when you cross lines that shouldn't be crossed." "Lucien, did you know she works at the library?" Lucien continued, pulling out another document. "Makes barely above minimum wage. Lives with her parents now because her ex-husband made sure she couldn't afford anything else. Spends her free time volunteering at women's shelters and food banks. This is who Adrian Corin thought he could beat up in public." Darius studied the papers, seeing tax returns, employment records, character references that painted a picture of someone who'd been quietly helping others despite having nothing herself. "You've been thorough," he said finally. "I've been motivated. By justice or by her?" The question hung in the air between them. Lucien had always been laser-focused on business, treating relationships like contracts and emotions like weaknesses. In 10 years, Darius had never seen him show personal interest in anyone, let alone someone he'd observed from across a crowded marketplace. "Does it matter?" Lucien asked. "It might. If this is about protecting someone innocent, I'm with you. If this is about something else..." Darius shrugged. "I'm still with you. But I want to understand what we're walking into." Lucien was quiet for a moment, staring out at the Chicago skyline. When he spoke, his voice was softer than usual. "I've never seen anything like what I saw that day, Darius. This woman took a public beating from a man who was supposed to protect her, and she handled it with more grace than most people show when they're getting a parking ticket. She didn't scream, didn't fight back, didn't make a scene. She just endured it and walked away." "That's not an answer to my question." "Then here's your answer. I don't know. Maybe it is about her. Maybe I saw something in that marketplace that reminded me why we do what we do, why we built this company, why we have the power we have. Maybe I saw someone worth protecting for once." Darius nodded slowly. "When's Corin's appointment?" "Next Tuesday, 2 o'clock. And what exactly are we planning to do to him?" Lucien's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "We're going to give him exactly what he's been asking for. A meeting with the Kalen brothers. A chance to pitch his dreams. An opportunity to show us who he really is. And then we're going to show him what happens when someone with real power decides you're not worth the air you breathe. Darius looked at the photo again. Adrian mid-swing, Selena standing strong despite the violence aimed at her. You know this could get complicated. How so? If you're developing feelings for this woman, destroying her ex-husband might not be the best way to win her over. Lucien considered that. Then maybe winning her over isn't the point. Maybe the point is making sure men like Adrian Corin learn that actions have consequences. And if she never knows what we did for her, then she never knows. But Adrian Corin will remember for the rest of his life that there are still people in the world who won't let him get away with being a monster. Darius stood up, straightening his tie. Tuesday at 2. Tuesday at 2. Should be interesting. As they prepared to leave the boardroom, neither brother had any idea that their decision would set in motion events that would bring Selena Moreau back into their lives in ways they couldn't imagine. And certainly, Adrian Corin had no clue that his ambitions were about to collide with the two most powerful men who'd ever decided he needed to be stopped. The volunteer orientation at Brookstone Women's Shelter was supposed to start at 7, but Selena arrived 20 minutes early like she always did. She needed this. After months of feeling like a victim of her own life, helping other women who'd survived worse gave her purpose again. It reminded her that she wasn't the only one who'd trusted the wrong person, wasn't the only one who'd had to start over from nothing. You're early again, laughed Patricia Coleman, the shelter director, as Selena arranged chairs in the meeting room. One of these days I'm going to start paying you for setup. I don't mind, Selena said, smoothing down tablecloths. Keeps me busy. What she didn't say was that staying busy kept her from thinking too much. About Adrian. About the marketplace. About how her life had become something she barely recognized. The other volunteers trickled in over the next few minutes, mostly older women from various churches, plus a few younger ones who'd survived their own battles and wanted to help. Tonight they were planning the annual fundraising gala, the shelter's biggest event of the year. We need corporate sponsors, Patricia announced, spreading papers across the table. Individual donations are wonderful, but if we want to expand our services, we need businesses to step up. What about that new company looking at properties downtown? Suggested Mrs. Martinez, who ran the local bakery. I heard they have serious money. Kalen Industries? Patricia's eyebrows raised. They're way out of our league. They probably write checks to museums and universities, not little shelters in small towns. Selena looked up from the registration forms she was organizing. What kind of company is it? Technology, real estate, some kind of investment firm. They're scouting locations for a regional office. Word is they could bring hundreds of jobs to the area if they decide to settle here. Have you tried reaching out to them? Patricia laughed. Honey, I don't even know how to contact people like that. They probably have assistants who have assistants. Selena made a mental note to do some research. Maybe companies like Kalen Industries got hundreds of funding requests, but that didn't mean they said no to all of them. And the shelter desperately needed money for expansion. The meeting lasted 2 hours, planning everything from catering to entertainment for the gala. Selena volunteered to handle decorations, coordinate volunteers, and tackle the sponsorship outreach. Basically everything nobody else wanted to do. You sure you can handle all that? Patricia asked as they cleaned up afterward. I've got time, Selena said, which was true. When your social life consisted of work, family dinners, and volunteer meetings, your schedule had plenty of gaps. Walking to her car afterward, Selena felt something she hadn't experienced in months: excitement about a future project. The gala was 8 weeks away, which meant 8 weeks of planning, organizing, creating something meaningful. 8 weeks of focusing on helping others instead of dwelling on her own problems. She was so focused on mentally organizing her to-do list that she almost didn't notice the expensive car parked next to her beat-up Honda. Almost. The man leaning against the sleek black sedan was definitely not from Brookstone. His suit probably cost more than she made in 3 months. His watch caught streetlight like it was made of actual diamonds, and he carried himself with the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about money. "Excuse me," he said as she approached her car. "Are you Selena Moreau?" Every alarm bell in her head went off at once. Strange men in expensive cars didn't approach single women in empty parking lots for good reasons. "Who's asking?" she replied, keys ready to use as weapons if necessary. "My name is Lucien Kalen. I wonder if I could have a few minutes of your time." Selena froze. Kalen. As in Kalen Industries. The same company Patricia had mentioned an hour ago as being completely out of their league. "I don't understand," she said slowly. "I was in town recently on business. I happened to witness what occurred at the marketplace last weekend." His voice was carefully controlled, but she caught something underneath it that sounded like anger. "I wanted to check on your well-being." Heat flooded her face. Bad enough that Adrian had humiliated her in front of the whole town, but now strangers, wealthy, important strangers, knew about it too. "I'm fine," she said quickly. "It was nothing." "It wasn't nothing." Lucien's voice sharpened. "What I saw was assault. In front of witnesses. That man should be in jail." "It's handled," Selena lied, because what else could she say? That she was too embarrassed to press charges? That she couldn't afford a lawyer anyway? That part of her still felt like maybe she deserved it? Lucien studied her face in the dim parking lot light. "May I buy you coffee sometime? I'd like to discuss something with you." "About what?" "About the work you do. The shelter, your volunteer activities. I think there might be ways my company could help." Selena's heart jumped. This was the opportunity Patricia had said would never happen, a direct connection to exactly the kind of corporate sponsor they needed. But it felt too convenient. Too perfect. Men like Lucien Kalen didn't randomly show up in small-town parking lots to offer help to women they'd never met. "Why?" she asked bluntly. "Because I believe in supporting people who make a difference in their communities." He handed her a business card. "Think about it. My number is on there if you're interested." He got into his car and drove away, leaving Selena standing alone with more questions than answers. But as she looked down at the business card, heavy, expensive, with gold lettering that caught the streetlight, she felt something stir in her chest that she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. 3 days later, she called the number. The woman who answered sounded like she was used to screening calls for very important people. "Kalen Industries, Mr. Lucien's office." "This is Selena Moreau. He asked me to call about a coffee meeting." "Oh yes, Ms. Moreau. Mr. Lucien has been expecting your call. Are you available tomorrow at 2 o'clock? There's a cafe on Main Street called The Daily Grind." Tomorrow at 2 was right in the middle of her work shift at the library, but some opportunities were worth the risk. "I'll be there," Selena said. As she hung up, her mother looked over from where she was arranging flowers at the kitchen table. "New job interview." "Something like that," Selena said, though she had no idea what it actually was. All she knew was that for the first time since her marriage imploded, she was curious about what tomorrow might bring. And maybe, just maybe, the future held more than just surviving what Adrian had done to her. But she had no way of knowing that tomorrow's coffee meeting would set in motion events that would change not just her life, but Adrian's entire world in ways that would shock everyone who thought they knew how this story would end. The daily grind was busier than usual for a Thursday afternoon, but Selina spotted Lucien Kalin immediately. He sat in a corner booth, somehow managing to look perfectly at ease despite being surrounded by farmers in overalls and teenagers doing homework. When he saw her, he stood up like he'd been raised with old-fashioned manners, which probably cost more money than most people realized. "Thank you for meeting me," he said as she slid into the booth across from him. "Thank you for asking." Selina accepted the coffee he'd already ordered for her. Somehow he'd guessed she was a vanilla latte person. "I have to admit, I'm curious about what this is really about." Lucien smiled, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked less like a corporate executive and more like a regular person. Direct. "I like that. Small towns don't leave much room for beating around the bush." "Fair enough." He pulled out a folder, but didn't open it yet. "I meant what I said about wanting to help with the shelter. My company has a community outreach budget, and we're always looking for worthwhile causes to support." "That's generous, but I get the feeling there's more to this conversation." Lucien was quiet for a moment, studying her face like he was trying to figure out how much truth she could handle. "You're right," he said finally. "There is more. I've been doing some research on Adrian Corin." Selina's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. "Why?" "Because men who assault women in public tend to have histories. Because I wanted to understand what kind of person I witnessed that day." He opened the folder now, revealing what looked like financial documents. "What I found was interesting. I don't want to know about Adrian's finances." "You should." Lucien's voice was gentle but firm. "Because some of those finances used to be yours." He turned the papers toward her, pointing at highlighted sections. "This is your joint savings account from 2 years ago. $15,000, mostly from your library salary and the part-time bookkeeping you did for local businesses." Selina stared at the numbers, remembering how proud she'd been to contribute to their future. That money paid for the house down payment. Actually, it didn't. Lucien flipped to another page. Adrian used it to invest in a failed restaurant venture 6 months before your divorce. The house down payment came from a loan against his parents' property. "That's impossible." "He told me." "He told you what he needed you to believe." Lucien's voice carried an edge of anger that wasn't directed at her. "Your savings, your contributions to household expenses, even the money you made selling your grandmother's jewelry to help with his business opportunities, none of it went where he said it did." The cafe seemed to spin around her. All those sacrifices, all those times she'd gone without things she wanted so Adrian could chase his dreams, all those nights she'd balanced their budget down to the penny, it had all been lies. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked quietly. "Because you deserve to know the truth. And because Adrian Corin is about to discover that there are consequences for treating people the way he treated you." Something in his tone made her look up sharply. "What do you mean?" "He's been trying to set up a business meeting with my company for months. He thinks aligning with Kalin Industries will make him a major player in the region." Lucien's smile was sharp. "Next Tuesday, he's going to get that meeting. And he's going to learn that we don't do business with men who beat women in public squares." The words hung between them, loaded with promise and threat. Selina should have felt satisfaction, should have been glad that Adrian was finally going to face consequences for his actions. Instead, she felt something unexpected: concern. "You can't destroy someone's livelihood because of what happened between us," she said slowly. "I can't." Lucien's eyebrows raised. Watch me. That's not justice. That's revenge. Sometimes they're the same thing. Selina leaned back in her booth, studying this man who'd appeared in her life like some kind of avenging angel. Rich, powerful, handsome enough to make her forget sometimes that she'd sworn off trusting men. But there was something in his eyes when he talked about Adrian that made her nervous. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Nothing. I want to give you something." "Which is?" "A chance to rebuild your life without constantly looking over your shoulder, wondering if Adrian's going to show up and humiliate you again. A chance to focus on the work you care about instead of worrying about making rent. A chance to remember what you're worth." He pulled out another document. This one looked like a job offer. "My company is opening a community outreach division for our new regional office. We need someone to run it, someone who understands local needs and has experience with nonprofit work. The salary is $60,000 a year, plus benefits, plus a substantial budget for community programs." Selina's hands trembled as she read the offer. 60,000 was more than double what she made at the library. The benefits package alone was worth more than her current annual salary. "I don't have the qualifications for this kind of position," she said. "You have the only qualifications that matter. You care about helping people, you understand how to get things done with limited resources, and you have integrity." His voice softened. "The rest can be taught. And Adrian? Adrian will be handled separately from this offer. Your future shouldn't depend on his consequences." Selina stared at the job offer, seeing a door opening to possibilities she'd never dared imagine. Financial security. Meaningful work. The chance to help people on a scale she'd only dreamed about. But doors that opened this easily usually came with strings attached. "I need time to think about it," she said. "Of course." Lucien handed her another business card. "Take all the time you need. The offer stands regardless of what you decide about Adrian." They talked for another hour about the shelter, about community needs, about her ideas for programs that could make a real difference. Lucien listened like her opinions actually mattered, asked questions that showed he understood the challenges facing small towns, and never once made her feel like she was out of her league. Walking to her car afterward, Selina's head spun with possibilities and questions in equal measure. The job offer was everything she'd never known she wanted. Lucien seemed genuine in his desire to help. But men who seemed too good to be true usually were. That evening, she sat at her parents' kitchen table with the job offer spread in front of her, trying to make sense of what felt like a complete reversal of fortune. 60,000, her mother whispered, reading over her shoulder. "Honey, that's more than your father and I make combined. It feels too good to be true. Or maybe it feels like you finally caught a break," her father said from his chair by the window. "Lord knows you've earned some good luck." But as Selina went to bed that night, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't about luck at all. This was about Lucien Kalen's personal interest in making sure Adrian paid for what he'd done. And she couldn't decide if that made her feel protected or like a pawn in someone else's game of revenge. What she didn't know was that miles away, in his hotel room, Lucien was asking himself the same questions about his own motives, and coming up with answers that surprised him more than he cared to admit. The Kalen Industries boardroom looked like something out of a movie about powerful people making world-changing decisions. Adrian straightened his tie for the fourth time as he waited in the reception area, trying to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. This meeting could change everything: his financial status, his business prospects, his entire future in Brookstone and beyond. Marissa sat beside him, perfectly dressed as always, but he could sense her nervous energy despite her calm exterior. They'd spent weeks preparing for this presentation, researching the Kalin brothers, crafting the perfect pitch for a partnership that would transform Adrian from small-town wannabe into legitimate businessman. Mr. Corin, a professional-looking woman, appeared at his elbow. "They're ready for you now." The boardroom was even more impressive than the reception area. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed off the Chicago skyline, expensive art decorated the walls, and the conference table was surrounded by leather chairs that probably cost more than most people's cars. But what really caught Adrian's attention were the two men seated at the head of the table. Lucien and Darius Kalin looked exactly like what Adrian had imagined billionaires would look like, impeccably dressed, completely at ease, radiating the kind of power that came from never having to worry about money or influence. They stood as he entered, offering handshakes and polite smiles that gave nothing away. "Mr. Corin, Ms. Vera," Lucien said smoothly. "Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." Adrian launched into his presentation with practiced enthusiasm, laying out his vision for expanding business opportunities in Brookstone, the potential for development projects, the advantages of partnering with someone who understood the local market. He was good at this part, selling dreams, painting pictures of success, making people believe in possibilities they hadn't considered before. For 20 minutes, he held the room's attention, clicking through slides and charts that made his proposals look both profitable and inevitable. When he finished, the silence stretched just a little too long. "Interesting," Darius said finally. "You clearly have big ambitions for your hometown." "I believe in seeing potential where others see limitations," Adrian replied, his confidence growing. This was going better than expected. "That's admirable," Lucien agreed. "Before we discuss business partnerships, though, we like to understand who we're working with. Character matters in long-term relationships." "Of course," Adrian nodded. "I'd be happy to provide references, financial records, whatever you need for due diligence." "Actually," Lucien said, pulling out a tablet, "we've already done some research." He touched the screen, and suddenly the wall display showed a video that made Adrian's blood turn to ice. It was security footage from the marketplace, showing him grabbing the wooden stick, raising it above his head, and striking Selena while she stood there calmly taking the blow. The audio picked up Marissa's cruel laughter, the crowd's shocked gasps, and Selena's quiet dignity as she walked away. The room went dead silent. Adrian's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Beside him, Marissa had gone pale, apparently not realizing their public confrontation had been recorded. "That's..." Adrian started, then stopped, realizing there was no explanation that would make this look better. "That's assault," Darius said quietly. "Caught on camera. In front of witnesses. Including children." "You don't understand the context," Adrian began desperately. "The context?" Lucien's voice was dangerously soft. "The context is that you struck a woman who was walking away from you. The context is that you humiliated your ex-wife in public because she had the audacity to defend herself against your new wife's cruelty. She provoked nothing." Lucien stood up, his controlled facade finally cracking. "She stood there and took abuse from both of you with more dignity than you've shown in your entire adult life." Adrian felt his carefully constructed future crumbling around him. "Look, that was a mistake. I was emotional. The divorce was difficult." "The mistake," Darius interrupted, "was thinking we'd want to do business with someone who treats people the way you treated Selena Moreau." "You don't even know her," Adrian exploded, his desperation turning to anger. "She's nobody. A small-town librarian who couldn't handle being married to someone with real ambition." The words hung in the air like poison. Lucien walked around the table slowly, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. When he reached Adrian's chair, He leaned down and spoke in a voice that made grown men reconsider their life choices. "Selena Moreau is worth 100 of you," he said quietly. "She has more integrity in her little finger than you have in your entire body. She took a public beating and walked away with her head held high while you stood there with a stick like some kind of caveman." "This is ridiculous," Marissa spoke up for the first time, her voice shrill with panic. "You can't judge someone's business capabilities based on personal matters." "We can judge whatever we want," Darius said calmly. "It's our company, our reputation, our choice who we associate with." "And we choose," Lucien continued, "not to associate with men who assault women, not to partner with people who destroy others for sport, not to enable cowards who think power means hurting people weaker than themselves." Adrian's face flushed red with humiliation and rage. "You think you can destroy me over this? Over some pathetic woman who couldn't keep her husband interested?" That was the wrong thing to say. Lucien's smile was sharp enough to cut steel. "Mr. Corrin, you seem to have misunderstood something fundamental about this meeting. We're not here to discuss partnership opportunities. We're here to make sure you understand that your actions have consequences." "What do you mean?" "I mean that by tomorrow morning, every potential investor, business partner, and client you've been courting will have received copies of this footage, along with documentation of your financial history, your pattern of deception, and your treatment of your ex-wife during the divorce proceedings." Adrian's face went white. "You can't do that. We already have." Darius pulled out his phone, showing a list of sent emails. "Amazing how quickly information travels in business circles. You're destroying my life over a woman you don't even know." "No," Lucien said quietly. "You destroyed your own life the moment you decided that being cruel was more important than being decent. We're just making sure everyone knows who you really are." Marissa grabbed Adrian's arm. "We should go." But Adrian wasn't done. His humiliation had turned to rage, and rage made him stupid. "She's using you," he shouted at Lucien. "Whatever sob story Selena told you, whatever act she's putting on, she's playing you for money and sympathy. She's not the innocent victim she pretends to be." Lucien's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Security will escort you out now," he said calmly. "If you ever contact anyone in my company again, if you ever approach Selena Moreau again, if you ever even think about retaliating for this conversation, I will make what happened here today look like mercy." "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." Two security guards appeared as if summoned by magic, politely but firmly guiding Adrian and Marissa toward the door. As they were escorted out, Adrian could hear his phone already starting to ring with calls he definitely didn't want to answer. But the brothers had no idea that their public destruction of Adrian Corrin was about to create a crisis that would test everything they thought they knew about justice, revenge, and the woman they were trying to protect. The phone call came at 6 in the morning, jarring Selena from the first decent night's sleep she'd had in weeks. "Selena." Her friend Katie from the diner sounded breathless and worried. "Have you seen the news?" "What news?" "Katie, it's barely dawn. Adrian's on the front page of the business section. Him and Marissa. Something about a failed business deal and assault charges and, oh honey, I think you need to see this yourself." Selena stumbled to her laptop, Katie's words echoing in her head as she waited for the internet to load. When the local news website finally appeared, her heart stopped. The headline read, "Local businessman's empire crumbles after assault video surfaces." Below it was a photo of Adrian and Marissa leaving what looked like an expensive office building, both looking like they'd seen their worst nightmare come true. The article detailed Adrian's failed meeting with Kalen Industries, the security footage of the marketplace incident, and the subsequent collapse of all his business deals. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that her name was mentioned 17 times. Selena Moreau, Corin's ex-wife, was the victim of the public assault that led to his business downfall. Sources close to the situation suggest Moreau may have connections to the Kalen brothers. The divorced couple's relationship has been strained since Corin left Moreau for his current wife. Her private humiliation had just become public entertainment for the entire region. Her phone rang again. Then again. Then it didn't stop ringing. Reporters wanting comments. Neighbors wanting gossip. People from high school she hadn't talked to in years suddenly interested in her life story. By 8 a.m., there were news vans parked outside her parents' house. "Selena, honey, maybe you should stay inside today," her mother suggested, peeking through the curtains at the growing crowd of journalists. But staying inside felt like hiding, and Selena was tired of hiding. She was tired of being the victim in everyone else's story, tired of having her life dissected by people who didn't know her, tired of being defined by what Adrian had done to her. She got dressed, put on makeup for the first time in weeks, and walked outside to face the cameras. "Ms. Moreau, can you comment on the Kalen Industries situation? Did you know the Kalen brothers before this incident? How do you feel about your ex-husband's business empire collapsing?" Selena stood on her parents' front porch, looking at the crowd of strangers who wanted to turn her pain into a news story, and felt something shift inside her. "I have one statement," she said clearly. "What happened in the marketplace was between Adrian and me. I never asked anyone to fight my battles for me, and I never asked for this situation to become a public spectacle. But surely you must feel vindicated." "I feel sad," Selena interrupted. "I feel sad that a man I once loved became someone who could hurt people for sport. I feel sad that his new wife finds pleasure in other people's pain. And I feel sad that everyone seems more interested in revenge than in preventing this from happening to someone else." "What about the Kalen brothers? Are you romantically involved with Lucien Kalen?" The question hit like a slap. "I barely know Mr. Kalen. We had one business meeting about community outreach programs. That's all." But even as she said it, she wondered if it was entirely true. The way Lucien had looked at her during their coffee meeting hadn't felt like business. The job offer hadn't felt like charity. And the way he'd talked about Adrian's punishment had felt distinctly personal. After the reporters finally dispersed, Selena sat in her childhood bedroom trying to make sense of what her life had become. In 24 hours, she'd gone from small-town nobody to the center of a regional business scandal. Adrian's empire was in ruins, Marissa was apparently facing social exile, and Selena was being painted as either a victim or a manipulator depending on which news outlet you read. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I'm sorry. This wasn't supposed to happen this way. Lucien." Of course he had her number. She stared at the message for a long time before responding, "We need to talk." They met that evening at a park outside of town, away from reporters and curious neighbors. Lucien looked like he hadn't slept, his usual perfect composure replaced by something that looked almost like guilt. "I never intended for you to be dragged into this," he said before she could speak. "But you knew it would happen," Selena replied. "You knew that destroying Adrian publicly would put me in the spotlight too. I thought about you being vindicated. I didn't think about you being scrutinized." "Why?" The question that had been building all day finally burst out. "Why did you do this? Why did you risk your company's reputation to destroy a man you'd never met before that day in the marketplace?" Lucien was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Because, he said finally, I've seen a lot of powerful men hurt people weaker than themselves. I've watched them get away with it because nobody with enough power cared enough to stop them. And when I saw you take that beating and walk away with more dignity than he'll ever possess, I couldn't let him get away with it. That's not the whole truth. No, he admitted. It's not. So what is? Lucien looked at her in the fading daylight, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked uncertain. The whole truth is that watching you handle that situation with such grace made me realize I'd never met anyone like you before. The whole truth is that I spent 3 days researching your life not just to build a case against Adrian, but because I wanted to understand what kind of person you are. The whole truth is that somewhere between seeing you get hurt and watching you help other people despite your own pain, I started caring about what happened to you. The words hung between them like a confession. You barely know me, Selina said softly. I know you work at a library for barely above minimum wage and spend your free time helping women who've been abused. I know you lost everything in your divorce, but you're more concerned about other people than yourself. I know you took a public beating and your first instinct was to make sure it didn't define you. His voice grew stronger. I know you're the kind of person who deserves better than what life has given you so far. Selina felt tears threatening, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. The job offer, she said. Was it real or was it part of some rescue fantasy? The job is real. The company needs someone like you, and you're qualified for it in ways that matter more than any degree. He paused. But yes, part of me offered it because I wanted to give you options Adrian tried to take away. And now I'm hoping you'll take it because you want to, not because you feel obligated to me or because you need rescuing. Selina looked at this man who'd turned her world upside down in the span of a week. Rich, powerful, handsome enough to make her forget sometimes why trusting men was dangerous. But more than that, someone who'd seen her at her worst moment and decided she was worth protecting. I'm scared, she admitted. Of me. Of this. Of caring about someone again. Of hoping for something that might not be real. Lucien stepped closer, close enough that she could see the sincerity in his eyes. Then let me prove it's real, he said quietly. Take the job because it's a good opportunity. Let me take you to dinner because I enjoy your company. Give us a chance to see what this could be without the drama of revenge and reporters and everything else. As the last light faded from the sky, Selina realized she was standing at another crossroads. She could go back to her small, safe life, avoiding risk and protecting herself from potential heartbreak. Or she could take a chance on something that felt too good to be true but might just be the break she'd been waiting for. But what neither of them knew was that Adrian's humiliation had pushed him past the breaking point, and he was about to make a decision that would put Selina in more danger than she'd ever imagined. 6 months later, Selina stood in the main conference room of the newly opened Kalen Industries regional office, watching the final preparations for the biggest community outreach event Brookstone had ever seen. The past half-year had been a whirlwind of changes that still felt surreal sometimes. The job at Kalen Industries had turned out to be everything Lucien had promised and more. Challenging, meaningful work that let her help entire communities instead of just individual families. The women's shelter had received a $250,000 grant. 3 new affordable housing projects were breaking ground. And the job training programs she'd developed were already placing people in careers they'd never thought possible. But the biggest change wasn't professional. It was personal. You're thinking too hard again, Lucien said, appearing beside her with 2 cups of coffee. Even after all these months, he still remembered exactly how she liked it. Just making sure everything's perfect for tonight, she said, accepting the warm cup gratefully. This event could help dozens of families get back on their feet. It will be perfect because you planned it. He squeezed her shoulder gently. You always think of details nobody else considers. The touch sent familiar warmth through her chest. Their relationship had developed slowly, carefully, built on long conversations over coffee and shared dinners where they talked about everything except the dramatic way they'd met. Lucien had kept his promise to let things unfold naturally, never pushing, never assuming, always making sure she felt safe to choose her own pace. And somewhere along the way, she'd fallen in love with him. Really, truly, completely in love in a way that made her understand why her marriage to Adrian had felt like settling. "Nervous about tonight?" he asked, studying her face with the attention he always gave her. "A little. It's one thing to plan these programs on paper, another to watch them come to life in front of the whole community." "Including your parents?" Selina smiled. Margaret and Robert Moreau had been skeptical at first about their daughter's sudden career change and her relationship with a man they'd only read about in business magazines. But 6 months of watching Selina bloom into someone more confident and purposeful had won them over completely. "Especially my parents. Dad's been bragging to anyone who'll listen about his daughter running programs for that big company." "As he should." Lucien's voice carried the pride that still surprised her sometimes. "You've accomplished more in 6 months than most people do in years." The success felt earned in a way her marriage never had. Every program she'd launched, every family she'd helped, every partnership she'd built with local organizations, it all came from her own ideas, her own hard work, her own vision for what was possible. As for Adrian, his fall from grace had been swift and complete. The business deals had evaporated overnight. The house had been foreclosed on when he couldn't make payments. Marissa had left him within 2 months, apparently deciding that standing by her man wasn't worth the social exile. Last she'd heard, Adrian had moved to another state, trying to start over somewhere nobody knew his story. Part of her felt sorry for him, the part that remembered loving him once. But mostly, she felt free. 5 minutes to showtime," Darius announced, walking into the conference room with his usual commanding presence. Over the months, Selina had grown comfortable with Lucien's brother, appreciating his dry humor and the way he clearly loved his younger sibling. "Ready to watch Selina make us all look bad?" Lucien asked. "Wouldn't be the first time," Darius replied with a grin that made Selina laugh. The community center was packed beyond capacity. Local families, business owners, city council members, reporters from 3 counties, and what looked like half of Brookstone had turned out for the launch of the region's most ambitious community development program. Selina took the stage with confidence she'd learned to own, looking out at faces that represented everything she'd worked toward for the past 6 months. "6 months ago," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the packed room, "I was a different person living a much smaller life. I thought my story was about surviving disappointment and starting over from nothing." She found her parents in the crowd, their faces glowing with pride. "What I learned was that sometimes our worst moments are just clearing the path for our best ones. Sometimes the people who hurt us are unknowingly pushing us toward the people who will help us heal. And sometimes what looks like an ending is actually the beginning of something better than we ever imagined possible." The applause was warm, supportive, filled with recognition from people who'd watched her journey. "The programs we're launching tonight aren't about charity or pity. They're about recognizing that everyone deserves a chance to build something meaningful with their lives. Everyone deserves to be seen for their potential instead of their problems. Everyone deserves a love story that honors who they really are." As she outlined the job training programs, the educational scholarships, the small business support initiatives, Selina caught sight of Lucien in the back of the room. He was watching her with an expression that made her heart race. Pride, admiration, and something deeper that promised forever in a way Adrian never had. After the formal presentation, as people mingled and explored the program booths, Lucien found her on the community center's back patio. "You were amazing up there," he said, pulling her into his arms. "I had good motivation." She looked up at him, still sometimes amazed that this man had chosen her, was still choosing her every day. "Selena," he said quietly, and something in his tone made her pulse quicken. "Yes. I love watching you change lives. I love the way you see possibility where others see problems. I love how you turned pain into purpose and defeat into determination." His voice grew softer. "But mostly, I love you. All of you. The way you were, the way you are, the way you're still becoming." He pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket, and Selena's breath caught. "I'm not asking you to save me or complete me or fix anything broken," he continued, dropping to one knee right there under the stars. "I'm asking you to build something beautiful with me. Something real. Something that honors both of us exactly as we are." The ring was perfect, elegant but not flashy, classic but uniquely hers. "Selena Moreau," Lucien said, his voice steady and sure. "Will you marry me?" Through happy tears, she saw her whole life spreading out ahead of them. Not the fairy tale she'd believed in at 23, but something better. Something real. Something built on respect and choice and the kind of love that made both people stronger. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her, applause erupted from inside the community center. Apparently, their private moment had been visible through the windows, and the entire crowd had been watching their love story unfold. But instead of feeling exposed or embarrassed, Selena felt celebrated. These were her people, her community, her friends, her chosen family. Of course they wanted to share this moment with her. Later that night, as they walked through downtown Brookstone hand in hand, Selena thought about the journey that had brought her here. The heartbreak that had taught her what love wasn't. The humiliation that had shown her what dignity looked like. The revenge that had become justice. The stranger who'd become her greatest supporter and deepest love. "Any regrets?" Lucien asked, reading her contemplative mood perfectly. "About what?" "Any of it. Adrian, the divorce, the public mess, taking a chance on us." Selena considered the question seriously. A year ago, if someone had told her that her marriage would end in public humiliation but lead to a love story more beautiful than anything she'd ever imagined, she wouldn't have believed them. "No regrets," she said finally. "Pain teaches us things happiness can't. And everything that happened brought me to you, to this work, to this life. I wouldn't change any of it. Even the parts that hurt. Especially the parts that hurt. They taught me what I was worth. They taught me what real love looks like. They taught me that I was strong enough to rebuild from nothing, and wise enough to recognize something genuine when I found it." As they stopped in front of the flower shop where she'd grown up, Selena realized something profound. Her story had never been about the man who left her. It had always been about the woman she became after he was gone. "I love you, Lucien Kalin," she said, turning to face the man who'd seen her at her lowest moment and decided she was worth everything he had to offer. "I love you too, Selena Moreau. Soon to be Selena Kalin. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Everything about our future has a nice ring to it." And as they walked home together under the Brookstone stars, both of them knew that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the most painful endings. Sometimes the people who break us are just clearing the way for the people who will help us build something even better. Sometimes fairy tales are real, they just don't always start with "once upon a time." Sometimes they start with "this is where it all went wrong," and end with "this is where it all became right." Their love story was just beginning, built on a foundation of respect, choice, and the understanding that the best relationships don't complete you. They celebrate who you already are while inspiring you to become who you're meant to be. If you found yourself rooting for Selena's journey from heartbreak to happiness, if her story of resilience and real love inspired you to believe in second chances, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because everyone deserves to hear stories about people who refuse to stay broken. Share your thoughts in the comments about what real love looks like to you, and inspire others who might need reminding that their story isn't over just because someone else decided to leave. Sometimes the most beautiful chapters are the ones we write after we learn to love ourselves enough to demand better.